The Education Collaborative was envisioned by Ashesi University back in 2016 when in thinking about our skills strategy as a university, we asked ourselves, how quickly can we really bring about this African Renaissance if we're just doing it within ourselves at Ashesi University? So in thinking around this goal for transformation, we asked ourselves, could we rather bring along other institutions on the continent who buy into this similar vision to work together to really rapidly and quickly scale the outcomes for students on the continent. And so in achieving that, we've had to work through the differences in culture, the differences in context, the differences in types of institution, right? So those have really been our biggest challenges. And in tackling that, we've had to take a very organic approach to building the relationships and the connections that we've established in the Education Collaborative. So I would say the university leaders really have been our biggest ally, working through the kinks together, working through how to collaborate more efficiently and effectively, and helping us to determine where to prioritize resources and efforts to ensure the best outcomes. Also, a very notable ally has been the Mastercard Foundation in believing in this vision, in this initiative, and supporting through its resourcing for the next few years. In the last 3 years, we have been rolling out our 10-year strategy, ending in 2030. In doing that, we've really figured out how best to set up a regional hub, because the Education Collaborative is organized or implemented through regional hubs to drive further contextualization and relevance of the solutions and the sharing that happens. And in the last 3 years, one of the biggest successes is setting up these regional hubs. We set up East African Hub with about 10 institutions being the anchors in that region. And then we set up with the West Africa regional hubs with close to 15 higher education institutions really driving priorities in that region. So the future looks like institutions seamlessly working towards one goal for transformative higher education in Africa. And I think that's one of the biggest goals we are working towards in the Education Collaborative, to build a certain culture of trust such that institutions at any point feel like they can rely on each other to learn, to address challenges, and to make progress in giving quality education to the students that come through their systems and structures.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on why African universities should engage in technology transfer. I am Mashidu Nonalo, a technology transfer officer from Stellenbosch University, and I am delighted to facilitate this important conversation on how African universities can drive economic and social transformation by turning research into real-world solutions. Like the common phrase, iron sharpens iron, we will dive into the role of the South African government in strengthening technology transfer offices, as well as explore the Stellenbosch University technology transfer journey. We have an exciting lineup of speakers who will share their expertise and experiences in shaping South Africa's technology transfer landscape. So without further ado, let's get started. So our first speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce Jetani Chasley, who is the Chief Head of the National Intellectual Property Management Office, in short, referred to as NIPMO. A bit about Jetani: she completed her Bachelor of Pharmacy in 2006 and a Bachelor's of Law in 2010. She is registered as a patent attorney and a pharmacist and an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa. Let's turn it over to Jetani to share her insights.
Mashidu, thank you so much for that introduction. Mashidu, I just want to double check. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. Colleagues, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for the invitation to present I want to quickly take you through the South African government and why we believe that innovation and technology transfer is very important. But I think it will just be apt to start off with, what does the South African landscape look like? In South Africa, we have a various amounts of IP, intellectual property or technology transfer related legislative frameworks. We have what you would call the more traditional IP legislations, Designs Act, Patents Act, Trademarks Act. Then we have plant and medicinal related IP legislations. And then there's this category, like what I like to call others. And in the other category, you will see a legislation called the Intellectual Property Rights from Publicly Financed Research and Development Act. And this is the act that we will be talking about today. You will also note that in this other category, I have included the Technology Innovation Agency that funds technology development in South Africa. I've included here the protection, promotion, development, and management of indigenous knowledge, as our IKS systems is also something that has to be protected and promoted. But let me not bore you with all of these IP legislations. Let's go over to the Intellectual Property Rights from Publicly Financed Research and Development Act. For short, I'm going to call it the IPR Act. So prior to the IPR Act, South Africa lacked a uniform framework for managing intellectual property from publicly financed research and development. So this resulted in the South African government putting quite a lot of money in projects, but due to lack of management, limited commercialization, there was missed opportunities. So the Act came into force, was promulgated in 2008 and came into force in 2010. This Act established an office called NIPMO, the National Intellectual Property Management Office, which I am the head of. And our office is there to ensure that outputs from publicly financed research and development is identified, protected, utilized, and commercialized for the benefit of the people of the Republic. NIPMO as an office ensures legal compliance. We approve certain IP transactions. We maintain a confidential base of intellectual property which emanated from R&D. We have IP awareness and advocacy capacity building sessions, as well as we administer two funds, OTT Support Fund and IP Fund. So this Act is a very specific, very small scope. It's only for IP that was as a result of an R&D activity and that was publicly funded. Anything else is not within our scope or in our mandate. Now, this Act has moved ownership of intellectual property that was previously scattered, sometimes with the researchers, sometimes with government. It is now mandated that the institution, the university, or the science council owns the intellectual property that comes from the publicly funded research. Now that they own it, they have a mandate now to commercialize, utilize, protect where appropriate, and make sure that what is coming out of our tax money finds impact and an application. It's also a requirement for the Act to benefit share with IP creators, to report to NIPMO, and to establish offices of technology transfer at every university and every science council. So we call it an Office of Technology Transfer. Our universities call it a Technology Transfer Office. Some call themselves the Innovation Office. But I'm sure you understand that every university and science council must have an office that takes on the responsibility of technology transfer and knowledge transfer. So why was this legislation put in place? Well, it was to make sure that government do what it does best, to do policies. So the government should not be commercializing intellectual property. That should go to the experts, which in this case would be our institutions, our science councils, and our universities. It is also to make sure that now that there's an obligation placed on the institutions, that we can maximize our investment in R&D. It is also to promote inclusive economic participation and to create that framework on how to deal with publicly funded IP. I've now I put up this slide as well to tell people what we are not as an office. Well, NIPMO is not the Patent and Trademark Registration Office. We provide targeted funding for universities and science councils through 2 funds. We support IP protection and maintenance costs. We provide guidance and oversight specifically to the legislation, capacity building and IP awareness activities in collaboration with others. And so what we are not is we do not fund research projects. We do not fund SMMEs or private entities. We are not a law firm, although we do have 3 patent attorneys in the office. We also avoid direct commercialization or market entry support. As I've mentioned, we do not register any patents, designs, trademarks. That is the role of us for CIPC, Companies and Intellectual Property Commission. And we don't support anything outside of the scope of the Act. So how do we do it? We've got 3 directorates that ensures that legislation is enforced. We have the Advisory and Support Directorate, Funds and Incentives, and then Regulatory and Compliance. I'll quickly just run through some of the main things that these directorates do. For advisory and support, it is absolutely in the name. It's enabling IP management and commercialization through contract management, sector networking and partnerships that's maintained, general IP advocacy and awareness, as well as providing specialized certificate training for IP management and technology transfer. When we go to our Funds and Incentives Directorate, this directorate manages the OTT Support Fund, IP Fund, as well as incentive management. And then our last directorate is the enforcers. They're sometimes called the bad cops, because they are safeguarding the intellectual property of South Africa, in that they help with regulatory frameworks and compliance support, having a regulatory oversight, as well as safeguarding national interest. I will now just provide a few highlights on what do these directorates do. So in terms of advocacy and awareness, you can see that we have various what we call IPY sessions, World IP Day, IP for Teachers training, to try to make people aware of intellectual property and respect intellectual property. The IPY sessions are very often done by, in collaboration with our universities, where we will invite researchers, students, and public entities to come and join and talk about intellectual property. We also have training sessions, certificate training sessions. And over the past 8 years, NIPMO has trained over 2,500 trainees that were enrolled. From 58% of those were female. It represented 51 countries, including 25 African nations. It is through 5 distinct training interventions. And in this case, we have done training in all 9 of the South African provinces. In terms of partnerships, you cannot do anything without having a network of partners. And so our partners are not only our universities and science councils, which without them, NIPMO would have not existed. But we also have, as government, connections or networks with international partners like the World Intellectual Property Organization, government agencies, and then supports platforms and associations and networks. NIPMO is also part of the Technology and Innovation Support Program, which is a program hosted by WIPO, where you register to become a TISC host. And through a TISC host, you can get access to database, IP guidance, search strategies, training, and networking opportunities. If we go to our funds, government has realized that if you believe intellectual property is important, then you should also assist with the protection of that intellectual property. Therefore, the Act has set up what we call an IP fund. Now, this fund provides for up to 50% rebate to our universities and science councils for IP prosecution and maintenance costs, not just patents, trademarks, designs, any intellectual property within their portfolios. This is a rebate system, so you have to pay, and NIPMO will provide, or the department will provide, a rebate a year later. And as you can see from the statistics, over the past 13 years, we have received almost 600 million rands worth of claims, and we have received it from 30 institutions, and South Africa has 37 public research institutions. So 7 did not claim from the IP fund just yet. The amount dispersed is just over 260 million rand. And because of limited funding, we don't always pay out 50%, but over a 13-year period, our average payout were 48%. If we go to the OTT Support Fund, the legislation has put in place a requirement for universities and science councils to have this technology transfer office. But as we know, universities and science councils are cash-strapped. They are more focused on teaching and learning. So introducing this concept of technology transfer and now putting the requirement that there should be people within this office was something that was a steep hill to climb. So as government, we've realized that it is important to have in these offices people that are not just capable, but are willing, interconnected in the universities, so that they can promote their university and make sure that they can enter into licenses to the best of the university's benefit. So the OTT Support Fund has funds the establishment and maintenance of technology transfer offices. Well, in short, we just fund people's salaries. And that's why you will see in the funding allocation, 80% of the money that we have dispersed went to appointing warm bodies within the universities and science councils. The fund also provides for operational costs, OTT staff capacity development. And since 2019, we've realized that it's one thing to have an idea and to protect it, but to get it to that next phase, and I'm sure Anita will tell you about the prototypes that she has seen before, takes a bit more before someone wants to invest in it. So we provide a basic, call it more pre-seed funding option, where we will pay for feasibility studies, market assessments, contract drafting, just to help our universities a bit further along the line. As you can see, over the 13-year period, NIPMO has dispersed or awarded over 350 million rand, which accounts to almost 150 agreements to 36 public research institutions, wherein we have supported 243 staff positions at these universities and science councils, fully or partially. Sometimes the universities co-pay, and we have some various active agreements in place. But incentives for innovation and technology transfer is also very important. Incentives in terms of monetary as well as non-monetary benefits. And so as part of our incentive management, we provide sponsorships for SMME Innovation Awards. A non-monetary incentive that we have is that we issue the department issue certificates of recognition, as well as the department is working with the Department of Higher Education and Training, where subsidies are available for innovation outputs. If we go on to governance, and this is maybe a slide where I want to talk to just 2 minutes longer. In terms of the legislation, universities and science councils must report disclosures that they want to take onto their database to NIPMO. These disclosures are then updated every 6 months. And as you can see, NIPMO has, over the past 13 years, received over 3,200 disclosures, coming from 91% of our institutions. And as we are tracking the innovation, we can see that 14% of the active disclosures on our database has either been licensed or commercialized, which for me was quite exciting stats. But as you know, not all ideas are bright ideas, and not all ideas maybe have the market potential or will get that statutory protection. So before you are allowed to abandon your intellectual property, you must get approval from NIPMO, And as part of our way to make sure that the public has access to this disclosures, it has to be advertised on an Innovation Bridge portal where we connect innovators, funders, universities, entrepreneurs in one digital platform and try to make the most out of our disclosures and IP. Oh, and by the way, it's not just for publicly funded IP, it's for everyone. So register if you want. Apart from that, there's a few other regulatory issues that that NIPMO deals with. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's a requirement for everyone to have an IP policy that is approved by NIPMO. We are working closely with the universities in terms of determining the full cost of research, and therefore an indirect cost recovery rate is determined for each and every university. And we log all our queries so that when we are going to do amendments to the legislation, we know what are the most pertinent questions coming up. You would recall that I've mentioned that NIPMO needs to approve certain IP transactions. Now, these IP transactions are local and offshore assignments, meaning, the transfer of ownership, exclusive offshore licenses, and royalty-free licenses. Here are the statistics where you can see that of the IP transactions received, 70% were approved by NIPMO. What I found encouraging was of the local assignments that were submitted to NIPMO, you can see that we approved 90% of the local assignments that were submitted to us. Those that were approved, it was fantastic to see that 51% of those assignments went to university spin-out companies. And 74% of those approved local assignments were transferred to spin-outs, IP creators, or SMMEs, strengthening local innovation and commercialization. But it is important to track what you are doing. And so the government has a national survey for intellectual property and technology transfer. If any of you have indicators in your country that you want to benchmark with us, please contact me. We are currently busy with a third IP and TT survey for the period 2019 to 2023 or 4, which will hopefully be out by the end of the year. And so these statistics are all available on the DSTI, the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation's website. What I want to leave you with before I hand over to Anita is that when we're talking about technology transfer and why it is important, this statistic stood out to me. And it's that third paragraph, which I will read. Comparing to the baseline survey, with the survey that is currently here, the second one, the average number of IP transactions which yielded revenue between 2014 and 2018 was almost double that from 2008 to 2014, increasing from an average of 25.3 to 47.6 per year. And this is the power of technology transfer, identifying a product, getting it out there, licensing, spinning it out, even just utilizing it for social benefit. And so I cannot take credit for any of the slides that you will see now, but these are our institutional success stories. These are not all of them, but some of the spin-out companies from our universities, some from our science councils. I'm going on to our next slide. I'm still working on getting more and more and more, so it's a work in progress. These are also, we see products in the market. And so technology transfer is important because our tax money has resulted in a sweet potato being produced that has better nutritional value for our communities. If you look at the UWC one, is where they had free Wi-Fi at a very reduced cost being provided to rural communities. And UP, those socks that you see, those are socks with insecticide in them. Don't worry, you won't get a rash. But the patent with that is how to release the insecticide over a longer period. Therefore, if you walk in the bush, you won't get bitten by ticks or, maybe mosquitoes. But our universities and science councils have seen lots of international success as well. One of the things that Stellenbosch University, Anita's university, has done is, even in the environmental area, they have received recognition for shark-safe barriers, which is a better way to let sharks not come to the shore. We have an international designer, Ladumo. Even Barack Obama's wife, Michelle Obama, wore some of his attire. And the Nelson Mandela University Technology Transfer Office bought his first sewing machine. And if it wasn't for those offices, what would have happened with all of these success stories? So with that, I would like to say thank you and ask Anita to maybe take us through a more, from a university point of view, how all of these legislations work. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm not sure, can you see my screen?
We can see it.
Perfect, okay. Thank you, Jetani. And yeah, at this point, I just want to say that without NIPMO's support, we can do very little. So I always am incredibly thankful and grateful for what you guys do. Okay, I'm here to talk to you more about technology transfer. Let's just get this going. Okay, so we are all on the African continent. This continent is also known as the youngest continent because half of the population is younger than 20 years old. I can imagine the responsibility this places on the education system, but also on the commercial realities. So tech transfer is more than just patenting and licensing. It has also now developed into with a strong focus on entrepreneurship, but I'll speak to you about that. This is just my brag sheet. Our university is ranked among the top 350 in the world. We have now, it's actually just over 35,000 students, of which a third are postgraduate, making us a research-intensive university. Our structure is quite strange. We are lumped together with all the commercial activities of the university. So even the residential services, copy and print, rental office, all of that is lumped together in one. But it actually works very well for us, and we report into the Chief Operating Officer of the university. But then what is very important for us is what you see here, US Enterprises. So that is a wholly owned company of the university. And in that company, we hold the equity or the shareholding in our currently 35 spin-out companies. It is important for us to have a separate company to hold that equity because the university's role is to create and disperse knowledge, to do research, learning and teaching. So the commercial activity is slightly away from that, and we want to reduce the risk for the university by parking it to a degree, the companies, the spin-out companies, one level away from the university in a separate entity. It also allows for a much more agile approach because you will know the difference or the difficulty sometimes to navigate university processes. So within enterprises, it's easier for us to make decisions. We can do it faster. It's much lighter and much more commercial than in the university. The other benefit is also that we have a mostly independent board of directors in this company. So yeah, it's not a number of professors who make decisions on companies, but it is actually commercially minded people. And they also serve as an advisory board for us on all the other internal commercialization activities that you also see in the screen with the maroon tags. Okay, then the question is always, what is technology transfer? I just want to focus a bit on this. This is what my boss thinks I do. The university management isn't always very interested in tech transfer because it is something that is so on the side of the university. So they don't always know what we do. The researchers, I suspect, think that we do a lot of admin and paperwork. But at least Friday nights at the dinner table, my friends think this is a very exciting job that I have. But what we in essence do is we are kissing frogs, hoping that some of them will turn into princes. Okay, then where did it all start? It started many, many years ago in the United States, and I think it was first formalized in 1980 when the United States adopted the Bayh-Dole Act, which is similar in some ways to the act that Zethani has just described for us. At that time, technology transfer was all about patents and licensing. You identify technology or intellectual property, you patent it, and then you try your best to license that. Until quite recently, contrary to what people believe, universities in the United States were not really very interested in spin-out companies. When they set up a spin-out company, it was with the intention to have an entity to whom they could license. And other different from South Africa, and I think most places in Africa, is they didn't have to care that much about these spin-out companies because there was a very, and still is, a very entrepreneurial ecosystem around universities that absorb that company and looks after it. So, as I said, until recently, for the United States, or that was sort of the gold standard in tech transfer, it was patents and licensing. In the past decade, things have changed very much. It's now patents and licensing, it's still at the top, but now we have incubators, we have startup companies or spin-out companies that we have to care for. We must find investing or investment funding and then manage the funds. We must do, well, we are very involved in economic development, corporate engagement, corporate venturing. And then they also slapped student entrepreneurship and now also social entrepreneurship onto what we do. So it's a completely different picture than, I would say, 2 decades ago. Then this is basically a job spec or the requirements for technology transfer professional. As said here in the KCA, which is an Australian organisation for technology transfer professionals. This is their capability framework. Now, if you look at the tech transfer professional, what they must be able to do, well, it's basically every single function that you find in a company. I don't think HR is here, but all the other functions, from strategic decisions, PR, communication, legal, you must understand patents and IP, you must understand legal agreements. Then you must be able to communicate extremely well because you work sometimes with students, sometimes with professors, sometimes with the CEOs of companies. It's a very broad job. And as you can see, you must also be involved in technology development. You must think about the business proposal, the business potential. There's a lot that you must do. And then on top of that, also administration. So what the problem for us is in tech transfer is universities compete with each other for good professors and lecturers. But on the tech transfer side, we compete also with industry for excellent people. So often when we train people, we lose them to industry or to other tech transfer offices. But you can see why, because they have such valuable skill sets. So what is it? I tried to put down a few things of what we do. It's educating and creating awareness. So there's the awareness component, and that's mostly towards our internal clients, which are the staff and students. Then we must, once we have identified that IP, we must work with the researcher to educate them about IP and also protecting that. At the same time, we must decide if there is enough commercial potential to go ahead with the process and actually spend the money to protect the IP. Once we decided, but there is good commercial potential, then we have to go and look outside of the university for industry partners and collaborators. We have to negotiate IP license agreements. In many cases, we have to form and support startup companies, run incubators, run entrepreneurship programs, working closely with industry, and then also make sure that the university receives more R&D funding. If I look at this, I wonder what I'm still doing here, because it's a big job that way at the office. Good, so the team is responsible for our tech transfer office, for the tech transfer, entrepreneurial support. I think I've run through all of this, but then also IP. When people think of IP, they only think of patents often, but it's much broader. Patents is just a very small subset of intellectual property. Our companies rely very much on trademarks. There are also designs and other forms of protection. Good, and then there's also what they call the Registered Technology Transfer Professional, or RTTP. This is an international standard. So I would like to encourage everyone and make them quite excited about this. If you do your job well and you have acquired the necessary experience and skills, you have demonstrated your ability to do the job well, then you can apply for this international recognition. But yeah, you can contact me if you want to know more about that. Now I come to, before I'm going to end with why we are actually doing this, I first want to talk about the challenges in commercializing university technology. The first thing is we need industry to commercialize too. We cannot just commercialize among each other in universities. And as you can see here, if people in a university, mostly researchers, if they make contact with with industry, you can see there's a lot of community-based activities, problem solving, and then on the commercialization activities, very little it's actually the smallest part, and you can see that there's licensed research, patents, spin-out companies, and then consultancy. That is more or less the extent in terms of commercialization activities. The other is attending conferences, external lectures, etc. So it's actually a small number of researchers that participate with their tech transfer offices in this activity. Okay, now universities have access to a lot of intellectual property. We have really excellent laboratories and infrastructure, while companies have usually practical experience, financial resources, all sorts of opportunities in terms of employment and internship. So if you look at it, it looks like a perfect fit. But now, why is it important for industry? Or why is it important for universities to work with industry? Because they need funding for research. They come up with all these theories, but they have to test the application of that theory. Then they have to understand the needs for industry. If they want to be relevant to universities with relevant training and education and research, they have to have a close relationship with industry to understand what needs to be done. Also capacity building, improve their research output, and then also the possibility of licensing their IP and generate fifth stream income. So it makes a lot of sense for universities to work with industry. Likewise, it is important for industry to work with universities because they get access to a lot of technology, expertise. It's also good for their image and reputation to work with the university. They can source skills development, and it also there's a plethora of reasons why it makes sense for industry to work with universities. However, there are three realities that we face. We are very different. In industry, everything is about profit. Everything is about taking risk, quick turnarounds, adapts to change. Agility is a word. They often look at universities for cheap labor. So they don't want to pay much for research, etc. They want their problems solved. And they don't want to pay too much for it because they often believe, but it's a state, and state universities are there to, it's sort of like a charity and must just provide this. Then, on the other hand, if you look at universities, if you look at many there are universities that's older than 800 years. For example, Oxford. Why are they older than 800 years? Whereas you will hardly find a company that is older than that old. It's because everything happens so slowly. Time and money is less important for universities. They run according to an academic cycle. So if a company comes with a problem, the professor gets very excited and he says, well, yes, we can help you to solve that problem. It's a master's degree project, so you can have your answer within 1 or 2 years. But if it is a more difficult problem, then it is a PhD project, and maybe you will have a problem, a solution for your problem between 3 and 5 years. You can see it's not very attractive for industry. And then they want to create and disseminate knowledge, whereas companies want to keep their technologies and how it works often very secret. And then, yeah, we provide solutions to social problems, not necessarily commercial problems. So this difference, these two different worlds, poses a big problem for us. The other problem is technology at the university is at a very early stage. Industry often thinks that we have many of these things on our shelves, but in reality, we don't even have this, or this is all that we have. It's very far from a complete product. Sometimes we don't even have this, but in some cases we have at least a prototype. So there's also a complete mismatch in what universities have to offer versus what industry think we have. You will often hear them say, oh, you must have so many inventions on your shelves. I still want to see those shelves because they are not at our university. And then this person from MIT, Joel Fink, he summarized the problem for me very well. He says, as a researcher or professor, your job is to make one of something that works, and that is cool to you. But if you want to commercialize, you need to make thousands or millions of something. And the practical reality of going from 1 to thousands tends to be completely underestimated. That is entirely true. The third reality is that it is not working. It's not really working. If you look up the absorptive capacity and wider industrial conditions globally, then you will notice a few things. In the USA, it works quite well, because for a very long period, as you know, they started the act and to formalize tech transfer as far back as before 1980. So they had a long and strong focus, and their national policies are absolutely there to support entrepreneurship and technology transfer. You can Europe, and you can actually Google the European paradox. They are caught in that trap, where they have very competitive and innovative economies. They have a very strong university system, but they also seem to fail at translating these scientific inventions into marketable innovations. in our country, in South Africa, the industry is just not mature enough to absorb and develop early stage university technologies in general. You do find the exceptions, but companies don't want to wait for technology. They want to have ready technology that they can immediately start selling. So we had to change our focus slightly, adjust it. So we are still doing patenting and licensing. For us, it's business as usual. But a couple of years ago, we took a very important decision to ring-fence suitable projects where we have a willing champion and create a spin-out company. We raised then funding to develop the technology in that company and eventually service a global market. So it is investment money as opposed to company development money that comes in. And then we keep the technology as close as possible to the laboratory from where it emanated. And we give these spin-out companies the best possible support because we do not have the American ecosystem for entrepreneurial support as a luxury. So we have to do that ourselves. And we try and reduce the risk for investors as far as possible. So I'm just going to tell you what we do. We first raised the University Technology Fund. We opened a business incubator. We created a tool to help entrepreneurs develop their business ideas into spin-out companies. And we created a support desk for them. Firstly, the fund. It was a wonderful journey, but we finally raised the first fund, I believe, in Africa that invested solely in university technology from various universities, and it was called the University Technology Fund. We started that fund just before COVID, but our fear was that university technology is not really an investable asset class among investors. They don't look at it as something attractive. However, that fund really did very well. During COVID, it became the most active early stage investor in the country. And that fund was depleted last year, and they invested in 24 projects from, I think, 5 or 6 universities. The UTF2 is now up and running, and it has also been broadened to include alumni from universities. So a certain portion of the fund can invest in the university alumni companies, and then that university will also benefit from any success. Then we started an incubator a bit earlier, actually, and you can see there are a few stages where this incubator that we call the Launch Lab is active. You start your journey as an entrepreneur with an inspiration and an idea. Then you need to validate that idea and decide, I have a great idea, but is it a business? Then you must actually set up the business, you must start the company and then take it to the market and grow it. Now, the Launch Lab focuses quite a lot on the very first stage, inspiration and ideation, and most of that focus is on students. But then we also provide excellent mentorship. We have the countdown program to help you validate your idea. Then the lift off when you set up your company, and then the cruise control when you start growing your company. We also created the tool, I'll speak about it now, the Instant Startup, on which the countdown and lift off programs actually rest. And then we created a network to just bring together the university, non-governmental organizations, local government, township entrepreneurs, listed company CEOs, all of them in one network. Yes, okay, I've spoken about the work that the Launch Lab does, and then the Instant Startup is an online tool because we don't have enough staff in our office to help all the entrepreneurs that want to start companies. So we developed this tool that literally runs from a business checklist to validating your idea, planning your business, forming the business, right through to getting investors, preparing for pitches, and then operational support. This tool is, entrepreneurs and their teams can work on this individually, and we can see in the background how they progress. There's a lot of information. We have a lot of resources. There's training. We have a lot of videos, articles on every one of the topics that they have to deal with. So there's also, at any point, they can call a human for support if they get stuck. So it's a wonderful, it's really an amazing product, and we are licensing this out, and with huge success. We get such great feedback from this project. Then we also realized that the incubator provides support for the entrepreneur in terms of developing that person as an entrepreneur and helping them grow their business. But there's a whole lot of other things that they also need support on. And for example, this desk that we created, the team negotiate discounts on behalf of our 30+ spin-out companies with service providers. So cheaper web development, legal services, bookkeeping, all of that. They set up the company, they register the domain name, appoint the directors, open the bank accounts, insurance. So they do a lot of these things in the background to allow the entrepreneur to focus on developing the technology and taking it to the market. They also provide free secretarial services, make sure that there's enough board meetings, AGMs, that it's well documented, because investors like to see that there is good corporate governance. We also assist CEOs with urgent matters. In one case, a CEO phoned and was very, very stressed because they didn't know what to wear to a panel discussion where they had to participate. The lady who answered the phone literally said, take me on this WhatsApp call to your cupboard. And she chose his outfit for him. So it's even down to that level that we provide the support. We also host boot camps for students just to create more awareness around the entrepreneurship as an alternative career option. We have hackathons and so on. Good. Our patent portfolio it's the engine of our tech transfer office. And you can see in South Africa, the public sector is in maroon and the private sector in gold. And this is the published PCT applications from 2009 to 2024. But what is interesting is that the public sector is leading innovation in the country. Okay, so I want to speak about our group of spin-out companies and show you the impact that the opening of our incubator had on the campus. This is our spin-out timeline from 1998 until end of last year. And you can see what happened the moment that we opened a business incubator, the Launch Lab on the campus. Suddenly, there was a place where researchers could go to for actual help. It's an exciting place with a nice vibe. There's good coffee and like-minded people. And researchers walk through it and see their colleagues open businesses there, and now they want to do it as well. So we experienced quite an enormous growth in the number of companies that we spin out. Then the companies are completely, there's a very diverse group of companies, literally from biotech companies, engineering, our gym also decided to spin out as a company. What is important for us is the impact that our companies have. So we also keep track of the sustainable development goals that our companies are actively pursuing. And it's quite important for us to know how we contribute to that. You can see the sectors are also quite wide, from healthcare, green energy, materials and tech, pharmaceuticals, software, education, sport, commercial. So it's or commercial services. It's quite a wide variety. In tech transfer, it's all about people in the end. So our stakeholders are internally the deans, the researchers, postdocs, students, the research office, the DVC Learning and Teaching. So we have a big cohort of internal stakeholders, and then also outside the government organizer or the government departments and offices. And then very important also industry, but other tech transfer offices. In the Western Cape, for example, we have 5 tech transfer offices, and we get together at least once a quarter in a forum just to discuss any challenges we have. We ask each other for advice, and the tech transfer offices don't really compete. Universities compete for research funding, but we help each other. It's a very close-knit community in our country. Now, the last question, why do we do it? What I've described here may be a bit challenging. It's difficult, I said. We need very skilled people. It's difficult to find them. It's a lot of work. We are often understaffed. There's a lot, there's a big workload. So why do we do it? I go to work every day with joy in my heart because it is a very rewarding career. You get to work with amazing people. Universities are very special places because the most intelligent and most amazing people are on a campus. Your young minds, it's wonderful to see or to be there. You also get to see the latest technologies. It's very exciting. You help the university to demonstrate that their research is relevant for society. It is not just blue sky research. You also help to create value. And there's nothing more rewarding than seeing an inexperienced young CEO who was a postgraduate student and immediately became the CEO of a spin-out company, become immensely successful. It's also a wonderful feeling to witness how a researcher came to you with an idea, but finally it is a successful reality at making a difference in society and generating a little bit of money for the university. And you also get to go to wonderful, interesting conferences, receive interesting training, and have excellent experiences. So that's why I think we do this. And yeah, this is my story. If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Thank you so much, Anita, and Jethani for the presentation. Yes, as Anita has mentioned, we've come to that opportunity for you to ask questions to Anita and Jethani. Do we have any questions for Anita and Jethani? At the same time, while we're waiting for the audience to pose their questions, we have received some questions in the beginning of the webinar, and perhaps I'll start with one question for Anita and Jethani. The first question for Anita. I'm just looking for the question. Okay, the question is, how can universities balance the need for research commercialization with the need for open innovation and knowledge sharing?
Yes, yeah, it's a very important thing because tech transfer is not about the money. The important thing is to ensure that the university is treated fairly and the university gets to achieve their objectives. Which is often just to get the technology in the market where it can have a positive influence and impact on society, on the people of your country and wider. So yeah, open innovation is often a very good opportunity to work with industry and to get a foothold in industry. So the balance, it's difficult to say exactly where it is. In some areas in the university, it's much more sort of prepared for patents, whereas other areas are more well, in their cases, open innovation is a better way for them to make contact with university. In our country, we must just make very sure that we still fulfill the requirements of the Act when it comes to even open innovation. But the Act is not that strict. We work very well with NIPMO to help our researchers achieve all of this.
Thank you so much, Anita. Just another follow-up question to that is, what are the key institutional policies which have been critical in enabling research commercialization at Stellenbosch University?
We have a specific policy aimed only at the commercialization and handling of or dealing with IP on our campus. It's a very comprehensive policy. It was also approved by NIPMO, and it talks about every aspect of tech transfer, including intellectual property management, copyright. It even talks about a lecturer developing content for, to teach and what they may do with that content when they leave the university. So it's very, very comprehensive and packaged in one single policy. Many other universities have a separate policy for spin-out companies, for example. We just prefer to keep it all together so that there's no confusion around this.
Thank you so much, Anita. And then this question could be for Jethani or Anita. This question is as to how do you advertise your university's technologies to get licensing opportunities?
Let me start with that, and then Anita can maybe add. I have put in the chat as well that we have, as government, joined forces with the Department of Small Business Development, the World Bank, the EU, and we've created the Innovation Bridge portal. Now, this is a portal, a digital platform for to create the innovation ecosystem. There's entrepreneurs, innovators, investors, as well as ecosystem support listed here. You will see this is not only just a South African platform. We have from Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho, inventions that tries to connect. Obviously, this is not the only platform where you can advertise your intellectual property on. And I do know that Stellenbosch University, as well as other universities, is what we call an instant access licensing. So as NIPMO, we always encourage anyone to please visit the Universities and Science Council's website. Typically, there will be a technology transfer or innovation support section or tab on their website that will offer instant access licenses for technology that is available for uptake. But Anita, maybe there's some more opportunities that you can talk about.
Yes, yeah, we advertise our technologies on our website. Mashudu will know, I spoke to them yesterday about it's quite tricky to advertise your technology on a website because we love the technology so much. We often talk to tech. So you have to literally translate the technology into a language that a non-technology person in a company can understand immediately what it does and be interested in that. So we write what we do blurbs. It is a very nice summary that gives you that entice you to read further and to ask more information on this. So it's a short teaser, but then a nice photo to see, make it very attractive and then put it on your website. We also advertise on a global platform called Impart, where we also get a better exposure for this technology, and then we hope for the best. And then it's not only about advertising, but you have to go and identify which companies will be interested in your technology, and then you phone them, you contact them, and introduce the technology on a case-by-case basis to them.
Thanks, Anita. We've also received a question about who funds the work that you do and what impact have you had?
NIPMO funds a large portion of what we do. They fund about as you have seen, half of our patent expenses, which is, apart from salaries, our biggest expense. In the past, they've also helped us with salaries. The university gives us, in our case, they pay less than 50% of the salaries in our office, and they do not give us a cent for patenting. But from the license fees, some of the dividend fees, we can actually start affording the rest. And then some of our other departments within the bigger commercial division also subsidize some of the work. It's definitely not a money-making thing. Globally, you will see that tech transfer offices, in the vast majority of cases, cost the university money. But the value of your tech transfer office in making your university relevant for society, in bringing those technologies to the market, that is why we do this, not for the money.
Definitely, it's not for the money. I agree, Anita. Chetani, we have a question for you here. It says that, what's your take on extending the technology transfer office function to public colleges to reach a broader audience?
That is a very good question. And I think it's all about the money. At this stage, NIPMO's funding in South Africa is limited to the 26 universities and 11 science councils. However, as part of the amendment to the legislation, there is considerations to expand that list of institutions to include other publicly funded institutions that undertake research. And I think when we are looking at setting up a technology transfer as part of the IPR Act, our focus is, does the institution do R&D that then has to have warm bodies, do the work, in addition to everything that you've heard that the technology transfer office is, asked to do. So for now, our legislation prohibits us from expanding it, but there is talks about, expanding the list of institutions. Also, let's think broader than that. If the technology transfer offices, as we can see, are making impact, maybe it's not just up to NIPMO, but as the Department of Science, Technology, and Innovation, what should we do for our public entities to have this technology transfer professionals within their institutions to do the work? Maybe not setting up a company, but creating a pool of competent, registered professionals that can work in various of these institutions and perform all of those functions that we saw a technology transfer professional should do.
Okay, then the next question, I believe both of you can answer this one. It says, do you have a policy for sharing profit for startups?
Okay, I've also answered it quickly here. Yes, it's all part of our IP policy, because the IP policy gives very specific guidelines in terms of how we distribute and share the income from IP. If you set up a startup, it's more than just IP, but we also recognize that if you patent a license, the professor often goes back to the lab, and the tech transfer office does most of the work to maintain the license. Whereas if you set up a spin-out company, the professor and the other entrepreneurs who start the company with him take a bigger risk. They are much more active in the process of commercialization. So we don't have we don't have set rules in terms of how much they get. They get the minimum they get. It will be what we offer on license terms, but we always give them more in the case of a spin-out company, because we recognize that they take risk, that they are more active, and the upside may also be quite bigger. So that's always the process for negotiation. Whereas if there's just license income, there's a very set formula according to which we we distribute that funding.
Okay, Jet, do you have any input on the question?
Sorry, I was also typing. In general, in South Africa, there are a lot of our universities have policy provisions for startups and profits. In terms of the IPR Act, we have benefit sharing. So it's legislatively mandated that if there is revenue accruing to the institution, that 20% of the first 1 million rand and 30% of the net revenue thereafter must be shared with the IP creators. Now, if you set up a startup company, that person, that the researcher might benefit from being a director or part of the startup company, as well as an IP creator at the university. And so various universities have different policies on whether it's an either or an and. And so my suggestion would be all IP policies. Sometimes it's in an IP policy. We have seen universities that's calling it a commercialization policy. And so it just depends on the naming. But there are various universities in South Africa that deal with how to share profits of a startup. But I have to say, all universities must have provisions in place on how they benefit share with their IP creators revenue that accrues to the institution, startup, license, or in any other way.
Thank you so much, Chitani. Anita, a question for you as well is, what are the 3 key aspects that African universities should focus on to increase commercialization of research outputs?
First is excellent communication and awareness within your organization. You need the cooperation from your researchers. They must actually trust you and know about you to come to you and tell you that they have possibly created an invention. So I would always start and say, you spend the first part of a tech transfer officer's life just internally, making sure everyone knows about you, everyone knows about the process. So you have to document that process well in a policy. So you do the basics. Then next is to start encouraging them to go to their labs and work with them specifically through their portfolios, make them excited about that. And then, also start talking to university management, because their support is incredibly important. If you want funding, if you want them to, you often need them to introduce you to people, etc. Then it's important to get their buy-in. And then the last thing is then you start looking outside and to industry, but also to other tech transfer offices, because you need to build your network. Without a network, tech transfer office can't function. So also go to the conferences. There are so many excellent conferences. Go to them. But when you go, make use of the time to connect with the people in between the sessions. Take your business card, build your relationships, so that when you have a question, there are other people that are very experienced who will help you with that and who you can bounce it off.
Mashudu, if I may add to that, what we have found is in universities that's got campuses that is not in the same place, they have appointed what they call IP scouts. Now, these are technology transfer professionals that they're not necessarily in main campus. They're on the ground talking to the researchers, making them excited and building that one-on-one relationship with, the faculties. We know that some of our IP scouts will sit in weekly or monthly meetings, let's say in the engineering department, if they have those. And so having a scout as an extension of your office is always very nice. What we have also seen is, you can tell people you are cool, but how you advertise yourself is important. So some of our universities have a come and have coffee, with our technology transfer office. Some will sit at the student center, hand out, everyone likes a free t-shirt or a free pen, but come and talk to us. You have to be seen as open. You have to be seen as someone that is going to provide solutions. And the researchers don't want to have extra burden. The technology transfer is there to do, have a good idea, but then they will work on your project for you. And so having that open communication for us, we've seen work, and having a newsletter or a functioning website or maybe a video or two always helps.
Thanks, Jetani, for that answer. We're almost coming to the end of our webinar, but we have another question for Anita as to how do you finance the training of student entrepreneurship training?
Yeah, that is a completely unfunded mandate at our university. So we had to be quite clever about that. Initially, we did it for free, but we couldn't continue with that. So now we sell boot camps to faculties. During the time that we were doing it for free, we also spent time in the faculties to convince them that we have these brilliant students, but we are always training well. We are teaching them to earn fantastically high salaries, but we never teach them how to pay salaries. So the faculties actually, they bought into that, and we said we have to broaden their abilities and skills to give them a better edge above other university students. So now we sell boot camps to faculties, very specific boot camps, and I think we sell it at about 75,000 Rand per boot camp, and then we get sponsors to help match some of the funding. So that generates enough funding. We do about 4 to 6 boot camps in a year. And yeah, it becomes much more attractive as well. I think initially we split it up into only, say, the economic and management science faculty, and then the type of examples and case studies we use is very relevant to that faculty. But now we start mixing and putting together multidisciplinary teams from 2 or more faculties at a time. And I must admit, the faculties are so chuffed and so excited about this.
Yeah, definitely. I see we've got questions from our attendees. I will ask Caleb to ask the question first. Please unmute your mic, Caleb.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mashudu, for the opportunity. And thank you so much, Jetani. It's a great opportunity again to see you and then demonstrate what you know how to do best. Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks, Prof. Anita. The question is very simple. I just want to know if there is any knowledge sharing platform for the managers of technology transfer offices in South Africa, because fundamentally knowledge sharing and experiential learning is equally important, even towards building capacity for the incoming TTO managers and the likes, and of course to co-learn and of course co-create solutions that may be facing the technology transfer offices. So are there platforms even for such learning? Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Caleb. Yeah, the SARIMA, it's the Southern African Research and Innovation Managers Association, forms such a platform for us because it's a community of tech transfer professionals as well as research support professionals. So they arrange all sorts of training and conferences and opportunities for various tech transfer offices to learn from each other and to network. Then in the Western Cape, as I mentioned, we have the 5 tech transfer offices who get together once a quarter and also learn from each other. And then informally, we know it's a small community, we know each other. So if I need a contact, I can phone my colleagues at UCT or Northwest University and say, I need a contact in this area. Can anyone help me, please?
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Caleb, just to add on to that, we know that the Western Cape Regional Technology Transfer Forum is exceptionally successful. So based on that, we know that the Gauteng Technology Transfer Forum is now taking shape as well. So we are seeing regional forums taking place. With regards to your online knowledge sharing platform, this is something that NIPMO is also looking in addition to SARIMA, which is the association, looking into how you can create a repository or a place where we can share ideas or share, things informally, similarly to what the Western Cape Regional Forum has done, because they are leaps and bounds ahead of anyone else. And how to recreate that is something that we are looking at. Maybe on an online platform as well, not just for South Africa, but more for a Southern Africa perspective as well, because we need to learn from each other.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Caleb. I see we had a hand from Isaac. Isaac, do you perhaps want to ask your question?
Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity to join this interesting webinar. Yeah, so I think my questions are in the chat box, 3. Yes, so 1, I want to know what the experts were, or especially the one from Stellenbosch, where he shared the very nice, what do you call it, achievements about startups that are Stellenbosch. So I think we can also learn from that. So I want to know that, because I'm from a newly established technology transfer office in Ghana, specifically the University of Cape Coast. And I would like to know what, in the experts' view, they will recommend that we should do in our first year of operations. And that's the first question. I don't know whether I should ask all the 3 or you take it one at a time.
Okay, maybe I can answer that one. I think it's very close to the answer I gave in previously. So if you set up a company, a tech transfer office, the first thing is to gain the respect and support from the researchers in your organization. So you have to spend a lot of time with them. I always say tech transfer is a contact sport. So you can't do it from your desk. You have to walk in the researchers' halls, in their labs, go to their offices, introduce yourself, tell them what you do, but tell them how you can help them. So once you have their support, you will start generating disclosures, or new projects will come to you, and then you can actually kick off that part of your work. But so setting up a proper policy and doing your internal marketing would be what I would do the very first year.
Thank you so much. So you've indicated, I don't know what I can follow up. We said like setting up a proper policy. What policy do you have in mind, please?
A policy that regulates how you deal, or how the university deals with intellectual property, who owns that, what do you do when you have created intellectual property, what is the process that will happen, if there is income, how will everyone benefit, how will that money be distributed. I actually have an entire presentation only on how to design an IP policy, which I can maybe at some point share.
Thank you. So the second question is, what best practices can a newly established TTO also learn, especially from Stellenbosch? And if you would like to also add your challenges to, okay, so it's a one at a time. So what are best practices?
Okay, the best practices is, we normally benchmark against global universities to see what their processes are, to ensure that our processes are fair, that it is fair towards the researcher and also fair towards the university. And then, yeah, what's the gold standard in globally? And we look at the process that we follow in our tech transfer office. So it must be a process that is thorough, that is manageable, and that lead to the correct outcomes. So we can actually talk for hours on those best practices. And then the challenges, again, the researchers, even you can do as much internal marketing, but there are still some who haven't heard of you, or they feel that they should own the IP. So there's always that type of misunderstandings or disagreements. But then a big challenge is that the technology is very early stage. The moment that the research is proven, you sit with a very, very basic and it's really a rudimentary prototype. And then to take that prototype further, you need development funding. Now, our university is a research university, so the moment you have proven the research, they stop funding there. So now we have to go about and find funding to do that development towards a more commercially or a more commercial prototype, something that you can actually demonstrate to industry and that becomes investable. So that early stage is a very big challenge for us. And then the other challenge is to convince industry to spend money and time and effort, and sometimes adjust their processes or factories to accommodate university technology into their system.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Isaac. I believe we've come to the end of the webinar, but let me as a facilitator just ask one last question to both speakers as a call to action as we end the webinar. Why should African universities engage in technology transfer, in your own words, in 1 minute?
Okay, I think it is important because Africa has its own problems, and they know the solutions to those problems. We can develop it on our continent. We understand our problems much better than anyone else. So universities' role is to make society better. So let's help the universities to get these solutions that they get for our unique problems in Africa into the society. That's the first thing. The second thing is also to prove to the world that African universities are excellent, that we do develop our own solutions, that we have the ability to stand on our own. And then on individual university level, it is wonderful to demonstrate to everyone that your university is relevant and that the research that your university does is applicable in industry. It is not just useless research. It's meaning something. It's making a positive difference.
Well, it's very difficult to follow on to that. But I think why do we want to do technology transfer? It's because we want to see those publications get life. We all do research in our universities. It ends up in numerous publications. But so what? Let's use that publication. Let's implement that publication, and let's actually change what we have set out to change. Thank you, Mashuru.
Thank you so much, Anita and Jetani. And thank you so much to the attendees of this webinar. It gives me a great pleasure to say that we had such an engaging discussion today. And I will hand over to my colleagues from the Education Collaborative.
Thank you so much, Mashudu. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Jetani, for such a wonderful and engaging session. So at this point, we will take a group photo. So I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Roland, and just ask everyone to briefly turn on their videos so we could take a nice group photo. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm standing in for Roland. So if we can turn on our pictures. Okay, I see Adam, I see Segun, I see Angeline. All the pictures are coming up. Everybody's smiling so wide. Segun has taken his glasses off. Fantastic. Okay, so I'll count us down, 3, 2, 1, and then I take a picture. I'm taking 3 images, if that's okay with everybody. Okay. So, okay, all the images are on. Fantastic. Let's get it going then. 3, 2, 1, cheese.
Julie. So we're always looking to improving our events and share the link in the chat box that leads to an evaluation form. So if you could just take a minute to fill out the evaluation form for our session. And I'm glad to share that we'll be sharing the recording as well as the slides after the session, and also be on the lookout for another session regarding technology transfer, where we'll be exploring concepts such as intellectual property in a bit more depth after this session. So thank you everybody for joining our session today. If you've completed the evaluation form, this is the point where we say goodbye and see you soon. Thank you.